one of the things that all of us has to do is make decisions. And this morning I'm talking about a book titled Yes or No, The Guide to Better Decisions. It's by Spencer Johnson, MD. He's the same author that wrote the little book, Who Moved My Cheese? And no, we don't have it in the bookstore. In fact, I don't even have the book. I had the book, and I brought my books to church, and people took them, and that was one that I gave away. But it was a good book, and I liked what it said. And the reason I'm talking about it is because I had a handout that I made when I talked about it before, and I needed the handout. You know, sometimes you just need some refresher. Since we've been in this building, it has been one constant decision after another. Every day somebody is asking me, where does this go? Who's going to be in this room? Where can I put this? Does this have to go here? And so, you know, I really realized that I want to make the right decision. Isn't that what we all want to do, is make the right decision? So I read this book about 15 years ago, and it's the story about a young man who wants to learn how to make better decisions, and he's going on a hike, with some other businessmen in order to learn how the process that they have learned in making decisions. And the young man leaves his home, and he's driving to the park where they're to meet, and as he drives, he realizes, oh, I forgot my directions. Has that happened to anybody? Well, he's already kind of late. He turns around and goes back. He's going to be even later. So he proceeds, and he gets there. You know, he kind of has an idea where he thinks it might be, and so he gets to the park, and he starts walking toward where he thinks that it might be the place where they're to meet. And as he's walking, he's realizing that, you know, maybe he should have gone back and gotten the directions. And so what does he do? He starts walking faster to try to find someone. And as he's doing that, he's wondering why so many smart people make so many dumb decisions. I mean, he's a smart guy. And he starts to criticize himself. He knows that he's sometimes indecisive because he doesn't want to make mistakes. And that's me. I'm indecisive because I don't want to make mistakes. He realized that he had never been taught how to make a decision. And that at that moment, he sees another man, and he tells him that he's looking for the hike. And the older gentleman says, I am your guide. You are headed in the wrong direction. And he and the young man turn and go the other way, and they begin to talk. And the young man says that I have come to learn how to make the best decision. As he said that, he could feel the weight. I'm always making the best decision. I understand how he feels. The best decision. We've had quite some talk about these windows, and I have wanted to make the best decision. And so what happens out of that is sometimes because I want to make the best decision, I make no decision. And of course we know that when we make no decision, the universe does not know how to step in to help because you're in no decision land. And so the guide in the book suggests to the young man that maybe we do not always need to make the best decision. For things to get better in our lives, we only need to make better decisions. And if we just keep making better decisions, eventually we'll do well. And what is a better decision? A better decision is one that makes us feel better about how we made it, and one that gets better results. The guide goes on to tell about how to do that, and I actually made copies of the handout for you so that you can take it home and put it on your refrigerator for when you're having those moments of decision-making crisis. There's something that I added to the bottom that was not in the book. And that is that we at Unity teach that we always have access to the divine knowledge of God. We are always one with the infinite mind of God because God lives within us. And so that we always have access to that knowledge and that wisdom. So to make a better decision, Unity suggests that you spend time in prayer and meditation. And then there's something else, like the young man, that we can do. Something that we can learn not to do. And that is to make a better decision. I can stop proceeding with a poor decision. Have you ever been on a path where you recognized that you were making a poor decision? Yeah. One of the examples that was given in the book was that the United States Army wanted to be able to get off more rapid rounds of cannon fire. So the Army hired a consultant who went into the field and watched the cannons being fired. And what he noticed is that every time when they were going to fire, the soldiers stepped back from the cannon and waited 3 seconds before they fired the cannon. And when he asked why, he was told it was the directions in the Army manual. And so when he looked in the Army manual and researched back, he traced it back to the Civil War when soldiers stepped away from the weapon so that they could hold the reins of the gun horses. Otherwise, the horses would bolt and run away and jerk the cannon off target. To make a better decision, I first stopped proceeding with a poor decision. To fire the cannon more rapidly, the Army needed to stop proceeding with the poor decision of waiting 3 seconds before they fired. When the young man left home without the directions, he would have made a better decision if he had stopped, turned around, and gone home and gotten his directions. So to make a better decision, I first stopped proceeding with a poor one. And now, for the yes and no system. There's a system in this book. And it involves asking 2 questions. Using our heads to ask ourselves a practical questions and asking our heart a private question. To use our head, we ask the practical question, am I meeting the real need, informing myself of options and thinking it through? Am I meeting a real need? And then the author suggested that frequently we're trying to meet wants and not needs. And so if we try to meet wants, we'll soon be wanting again. But if we meet our real need, it's much more effective. And the example they gave is somebody says, oh, I have to buy that house, that big fancy house, because I want such a loving home. And so when we pursue buying the real big fancy house, we may not get a loving home. We might just get a big house. So what we need to do is focus on what our need is. If our need is a loving home, we can have a loving home right where we are. And then when the big house comes, we'll have both. In the early 60s, President Kennedy said that he wanted to land a man on the moon and return him home safely by the end of the decade. He might have wanted to do it sooner because we were in a race with the Russians to get to the moon. I mean, we wanted to claim that territory. But he recognized that we had a need to be able to get the man home safely. What would have happened to our space program if we'd gotten him there and he couldn't get him home? And we know that. Particularly living here, we see what happened to NASA whenever when there's a problem. So when NASA was evaluating priorities by focusing on the need to get men home safely, it's easier for them to say no to policies, procedures, and deadlines that might have gotten us there sooner, but not safely. And in hindsight, we look back and we see that's exactly what happened. When our focus got off of safely return and on how fast we can go, we had some sort of tragic things. So the first part of this question, the next part of this first question is, am I informing myself of the options? How many times have you been trying to make a decision when you felt like you had no options? Are y'all awake? The first option for us is to realize that there are always options. And if we don't think so, we're living in an illusion. And one of the hikers said, if we're trying to find a site for a plant nursery and we find one that may be suitable if it isn't too windy, what do we do? One option might be to ask the agent, but what would be the better option? A better option would be to go out and observe when the wind is blowing. Another option might be to look at the trees and see how the trees are leaning. Are they bent? We could also find independent, knowledgeable, experienced people and talk with them. Again, validating the information that we have. How many times have we bought something and found out that what somebody told us wasn't the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God? There's a story about Henry Ford and the importance of getting information before making a decision. He had 3 regional managers, and he was going to make one of them his national manager. And he was trying to make that decision. And when he was asked how he made that decision, he said, I took them to dinner. And he said, because they were all neck and neck, he said, but it became really clear. It became clear as soon as the food was delivered. He said, the thing is, all 3 of them have been very successful at selling. I knew they could all 3 sell. He said, but only one of the managers tasted the food before he salted it. Only one of them looked for information before he made a decision. You know, sometimes we have that happen in our world where someone commits suicide, and I feel so sad when that happens because I know that they just could not see another way for themselves. And it's so sad because I'm sure that all of the people they love would say, oh, you could do this, or we could do that. There would be so many options. And the last part of that first question is, have I thought it through? Have I asked, if I do this, what's going to happen? And then what? And I have done this. I am so guilty of it. Oh, and it's one that's probably the most critical decision that's ever made. It's when you're either looking for a job or when you're looking for someone to hire. And someone looking for a job takes a job just to have a job. Or when somebody looks to hire someone and they hire someone just to have someone in the position. Oh my gosh. Because we want to fill the position now and they want a job now. And then we wonder why there's unhappiness when people don't work out, when the job and the person are not a good match. Our lives are shaped by the decisions we make, some of which we do not think are that important at the time. but our decisions work like little dominoes. We'll make one decision and then another decision and another decision. When you think about particularly that decision about where you go to work, oh my gosh, how many implications are there from that and for how long? So to use my head, I ask the practical question, am I meeting the real need? Am I informing myself of options? And have I thought it through? So that makes common sense, doesn't it? We all do that. Or hope that we do. When many of us make decisions, we only do half of this occasion. We will either use our heads or we'll use our hearts. And sometimes we get decisions that are based on half-truths. So I want to just encourage you that making a better decision depends on seeing at the time what might become obvious later. Ineffective decisions are based on illusions we believe at the time. Effective decisions are based on realities that we recognize. And this church has made some very big decisions in the last 2 years. And we're here because of it. But boy, along that way, we've had some major deciding points. One was when we were courting a school to be a part of our building. And, in hindsight, we spent hours and hours trying to make that work. When if we could have gotten beyond the idea that what they would pay our mortgage, we'd have realized this was not a good decision for the church. It turned out it wasn't a good decision for the church. And so we have to ask practical questions, but we also have to consult our heart. And we have to ask a private question. Does the decision show that I am honest with myself, that I trust my intuitions, and that I deserve better? That's a big one, isn't it? Take a breath. Does my decision show that I'm honest with myself? Do I trust my intuitions? And do I deserve better? When we're honest with ourselves, we are in integrity with ourselves. When we're honest with ourselves, we won't fool ourselves about a situation. And one of the ways that we can tell if we're trying to fool ourselves is if we feel any sense of fear or anger. Pretty good clues that we might not be making the right decision. Pardon me. To get honest with ourselves, we have to look at the fiction or untruth that would be more convenient to believe. It's like a television ad for motor oil. There's a mechanic, and I'm sure all of you have seen this. There's a mechanic who has a can of oil, and he says, "You can pay me a little money now." And then the scene changes where the mechanic is removing an engine. Or you can pay me a lot of money later. It may not be convenient or comfortable to change our oil frequently. Oil light on my car came on yesterday. And it will stay on until I do it. And it's not been always convenient to go get my oil changed. But I know that I'm taking better care of my car. Sometimes it's our ego that wants to hold on to the illusion we believe. And sometimes people who love us try to tell us that we're holding on to an illusion. And we can put our ego aside and listen. And so sometimes if you're making a decision and a trusted person says something to you about have you thought about, I would invite you to set aside your decision and listen. Because maybe there's something you haven't thought about. We have to trust our intuition. How does it feel? What does our gut say? And each of us has access to intuition. And how do we have access to intuition? What's the best way for us to have access to our intuition? Meditation. Whenever we get quiet and still, we give that voice of God that lives in us a chance to speak to us. One of the things that I have found when I'm trying to make a decision and I'm not clear, sometimes I don't know what my gut's saying. If I take a pencil and a piece of paper and I just start writing, and I write about the decision, and I just keep writing about the decision, and I write more about the decision, sort of like doing those morning pages out of Artist Way. Write when you don't think you have anything to say. Keep writing. You'll be surprised how your intuition, how God will show up on that page, and you can see, oh my gosh, something I didn't realize I felt or didn't realize that I knew. And the final question that we ask is, does my decision show me that I really believe that I deserve better? Does my intuition and my decision show me that I'm not settling? That I've stretched, that I've thought about what I really deserve? I can't tell you how many times people come and say, I made this decision and it's okay. And I know exactly what they're saying. It's okay, but it's not great. And what I want to affirm with you is that this God that lives within us wants us to have life and have it abundantly, wants us to prosper. And if we will get in alignment with God, if we will know that that we are God expressing, that we have the power, the co-creative power to express and create, then our decisions will not be one of settling. They'll be one that we make consciously for our highest and best good. So the yes or no system says I use both halves of a reliable system to consistently make better decisions. A cool head and a warm heart. I use my head to ask a practical question. Am I meeting the real need, informing myself of options and thinking it through? And have I consulted my heart? Have I asked myself the private question, does my decision show that I am honest with myself, that I trust my intuition, and that I deserve better? And to make an even better decision, have I spent time in prayer with God? Have I got my mind in alignment with the mind of God? We can make better decisions if we use both our head and our heart. And the everlasting truth is that by using our head and our heart in concert with God, we will always make better decisions.